Bounty hunters have existed for thousands of years, and have always had a unique place in society and law enforcement, though they've never been the most beloved group of people in history.
Bounty hunters? We don't need that scum.
Yes, sir.
Which seems unfair, considering how dangerous the job was and still is today. But bounty hunters served a crucial role in keeping law and order during periods of history where there wasn't much to go around. Now, when you hear the word bounty hunter, it probably evokes an image like this, or maybe this. In medieval Europe, law enforcement was decentralized. Local lords, sheriffs, and manorial courts maintained order. Without national or centralized police forces, enforcing the law often fell to individuals or small groups. To incentivize the capture of criminals or debtors, local authorities or victims could place bounties on individuals. These bounties were often financial rewards for capturing and turning in the wanted person. Bounty hunters often worked under the authority of local sheriffs or lords, giving them the legal right to apprehend individuals. They were crucial in a system lacking centralized law enforcement. But what did bounty hunters actually do in medieval times?
This is what I do. I kill people and sell their corpses for cash.
Their primary role was to track down and capture fugitives, usually dead or alive. Bounty hunters were also tasked with capturing debtors who had defaulted on their obligations, bringing them to court or directly to the creditor. In feudal societies, serfs or slaves who escaped their lords or masters were pursued by bounty hunters to be returned to their previous state. Their work was diverse and often dangerous. Whether or not they were tasked with bringing them in dead or alive largely depended on why the quarry was being hunted to begin with. Murderer? Probably dead. Running from a debt? Probably alive. Dead men don't pay debts. Dead or alive, bounty hunting required a very similar skill set that bounty hunters rely on today, primarily tracking, combat, and sometimes negotiation. Though the tools of the trade have changed since medieval times, they still serve the same roles. Instead of a car, you probably had a horse or two. Instead of a gun, pepper spray, and body armor, you probably had a crossbow, a hauberk, and a sword. Tracking and surveillance were crucial. Bounty hunters used local informants, studied recent movements, and understood the landscape. Physical confrontation was common, requiring proficiency with weapons and combat techniques. Methods of interrogation to get information from people could range from a reliance on charisma to brute force and intimidation. To infiltrate certain areas or gain the trust of locals, bounty hunters sometimes used disguises or false identities. A bribe here and there never hurt anyone either. Remember that most common people had very little and would likely roll over on an unrelated acquaintance for goods. Collaboration with local authorities, informants, or other bounty hunters was often necessary to gather information and coordinate efforts. Being a bounty hunter in medieval times was not without its risks and challenges. Capturing fugitives, especially those who were armed or desperate, was hazardous. Mistakes or abuses of power could lead to legal repercussions or social ostracism. Operating within the law was crucial to avoid becoming targets themselves, considering many bounty hunters were on the wrong side of the law themselves at some point. And medieval travel was slow and perilous, making the pursuit of fugitives across long distances difficult and time-consuming. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I plan to drop weekly videos about ancient crime, punishment, and policing, so thanks for watching so far, and I promise if you like and subscribe, it won't be as difficult or time-consuming as bounty hunting. Now back to hunting. And the big question, why? Why go through all the trouble, time, and risk the loss of life or dismemberment? For that sweet medieval cheese, literally and figuratively. The rewards for bounty hunting could vary depending on who was hiring you. Monetary rewards were common and could range from small sums to significant amounts, depending on the importance of the target. For instance, in England, during the late Middle Ages, rewards for capturing notorious outlaws could be substantial enough to motivate local villagers and even other criminals to turn them in. Sometimes the rewards went beyond money. Successful bounty hunters received grants of land or titles. This was particularly true when dealing with high-profile criminals or enemies of the crown. Land grants were a powerful incentive, providing not only wealth but also social status and security. In less wealthy regions, or for smaller crimes, The rewards might include goods such as food, livestock, or even tools. These practical rewards were valuable in agrarian societies where such items could support a family or enhance one's own operations of farming. Occasionally, individuals involved in criminal activities themselves might be offered pardons or immunity from prosecution in exchange for capturing or killing a more significant threat. This practice was a strategic way to utilize the skills of seasoned criminals against one another, which probably is one of the reasons bounty hunters have had such a spotty reputation throughout history. Imagine committing a crime with someone, only to have that same person bring you back to justice for their own pardon. And we all know that old saying, "Thy who snitcheth shall require needlework." Now, while it's difficult to find historical texts that specifically mention bounty hunters, there are some examples that reference the practice of pursuing criminals akin to bounty hunting. In William Langland's Piers Plowman from the 14th century, the allegorical poem references the idea of law enforcement and the pursuit of wrongdoers, reflecting the societal expectations of the time. The text emphasizes the role of sheriffs and the pursuit of justice, which could be connected to bounty hunting, as sheriffs would sometimes hire men to pursue criminals. The Assize of Arms from 1181, issued by Henry II of England, was a document that required men to be armed to maintain peace and pursue criminals. While it doesn't mention bounty hunting by name, it lays the foundation for practices where local men, potentially incentivized by rewards, would be involved in the capture of outlaws. And in the Magna Carta, Clause 28 mentions the seizure of property and livestock to ensure justice is served, reflecting the kind of economic incentives that could be tied to the capture and return of criminals, a role often filled by bounty hunters. Now, outside of what we can find that is written, we know of some other pretty famous examples. The legends of Robin Hood include numerous references to the pursuit of outlaws by sheriffs and hired men. While fictionalized, these stories reflect societal tensions and romanticized views of outlaws and their pursuers. And historical figures such as William Wallace were pursued by bounty hunter-like figures employed by the English crown. While bounty hunting has existed for thousands of years, and the tools of the trade have changed significantly, the job itself hasn't evolved that much. There are still criminals that will run from justice, and there are still rewards for those that are willing to risk everything to bring them in. The presence of bounty hunters and the threat of capture served as a deterrent against crime and defaulting on obligations during medieval times. Bounty hunters were integral to the enforcement of medieval justice. That concludes this episode of Ancient Order. If there's a period of history or region whose crime, punishment, and policing you'd like me to cover, drop it in the comments and maybe you'll see it coming up in one of the next episodes. Thanks for watching.